Hello, hello, hello. I am Dr. Andrea Greiner.
And I'm Katie Corbin.
Welcome to the Dreams to Dollars podcast, a podcast for entrepreneurs and professionals who are on their way to actualizing their dreams into reality.
Join us in this lighthearted and unique podcast where we talk about business, success, life, and building a deeper trust in God and the universe.
We are here to elevate the conversation and bring the magic to build your legacy.
We're excited for you to be here. Can't wait to dive in.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. We are so excited to have you here, and we just want to send appreciations to all of you wherever you're listening from. So many of you might be driving or walking or with your family or like just stuck in your business or excited about your business and you want to listen to something that's going to contribute to you. So Katie and I are really here to celebrate, contribute, to bring you guys just that encouragement and success that we know is possible for your business and whatever next big dream you have, right? So we're here for the dreamers and the doers, the people that have the big dream and they're ready to like take that action, or they're taking the action, which we know can often also be lonely sometimes. And we want this to be a place where you guys can always come and feel like someone gets it, right? So today's topic is really delicious. Katie and I have both experienced this individually with our clients, with other people, witnessing other practitioners, colleagues, clinicians, all of that go through this topic. So we're talking about burnout. And burnout is a very big topic. It can really affect mind, body, and spirit, your business, your bank accounts, and what does it look like to sort of surpass, like move through it, but not from obviously a push, and why it's important to talk about.
Yeah, burnout is a big topic. And I feel like a
Yeah,
lot
it's
of
really
people
big.
tend to talk about burnout in many different ways. And what we want to sort of offer is a little bit of maybe a different perspective than you've heard about burnout in the past. So a lot of times people think that burnout is just doing too much, like, oh my gosh, I'm too busy, or I'm have too many ideas, or I have too many dreams, or I'm juggling. Like, how do you find balance? Like they're like the indicator of burnout is like, oh, well, find balance in your life. And that actually is not completely true. So it's not saying that balance is not a good thing, that you can't juggle and do multiple things, like be a business owner, be a mom, have a family, be a wife or a husband, be a friend. Like, you feel like something has to suffer in order not to burn out. And I want to say I have a little bit different take on even like what balance is, because sometimes we actually feel like balance has to be like this perfect aspect of when yin and yang are perfectly aligned and they create this perfect this perfect balance in our mind and body. And somewhat that is true, right? When we feel like we're in balance and we're in sync and we're in rhythm. But sometimes what it takes to get there is sometimes actually imbalance when we're striving for a new level and we're kind of pushing up against a new level where we're starting to feel maybe a little energetically different, or we need to have something be the balancer. And when we can start to identify like what is that for us, we actually don't go into deeper phases of burnout. Now, the truth is we can actually go into um especially when you're pushing higher levels in your business, you can go into a little bit of phase of burnout, right? And you sort of catch yourself like, oh, I am my energy level's not where it's at. What is it going to take for me to get it there? Maybe it's supplementation, maybe it's going to your one of your naturopathic doctors or your clinicians and going like, I need like almost this level of energy that can help to sustain me through a higher trajectory, right? We actually can almost like kind of push the go button, and then what is going to be required in order to sustain that. So when we start to hit these levels of burnout, the first stage, right, is recognizing the awareness so you don't get into the stages of chronic fatigue and I can't get up in the morning and I have no motivation and I lack determination and et cetera, et cetera. And almost like you come to a place of like there is no purpose, right? And at a spiritual level, I do find that burnout sometimes leads kind of can leak from like not feeling purpose in your work. So there's almost like this balancing of the mind and body that needs to take place when we start to get levels of burnout. Like what is required here for me to actually extend into a higher level without burning out? And then spiritually is like, how can you actually deepen into your purpose and your mission? Like I am here on the planet to make a difference in somebody's life, right? Maybe it's not like, oh, I have to make a difference in millions of people's lives, because that maybe could actually be too stretchy under burnout. So it's somewhat identifying that first phase of burnout when you start to like almost tip into that. And then like, what is required not to go there, right? Like, what is required of me not to go there? Maybe it's a wellness routine. Maybe it's seeking outside help. Maybe it's almost a level of thinking a different way. Like, so what is actually required for you not to go into those spaces of burnout? And I do find that a lot of times when people start to think about burnout, they're like, oh my God, I've been there. And I've been there. I know, Andrea, you've been there too as well. We've had stages of burnout. We're also mothers, right? After postpartum and you have a newborn baby, it's like you're going to tank a little bit. Like even if you have like quite a bit of support, you may have late nights, you may not sleep well, your baby might wake up at night, and there's almost like this inevitable, a little bit of, I don't want to say inevitable, but there's these stages that you can start tipping, and it's like, what's going to be required here to allow me not to step into that burnout? Maybe it's more sleep, right? Maybe it's just like, God, I got to get more sleep so I don't go into burnout. So what's required for you when you start to notice that you're starting to go into burnout? And Andrew, I want you to even say, like, at a clinical level, what are some of the things that people actually feel when they start to go into that first stage of burnout?
Yeah, I think for it's often this like before they go deep into the burnout, it can also it's actually might even feel like a little bit of an addiction of like riding the highs of stress, right? So you actually might not know that you're in there because you have energy, but you're actually pulling from your adrenaline. And this can be, I mean, here we are, we've both made it through, we've gone through 6 years of medical school, I've had 3 kids, Katie's had 2 kids. Like it can be a little bit of an adrenaline rush, and then you have a business added on top of that. So there's almost this pull of adrenaline, and you might just feel tired every once in a while. Go ahead. I know you got
Yeah. No, I was gonna
yeah.
say this is like perfect. This is what I was
Yeah.
like picturing in my mind too. That
Okay.
first
Yeah.
little, that first little like, oh, I'm starting to like feel this effect a little bit. I know that I had this when I had my first son and I was running a business, and he wasn't a good sleeper, and he actually like we had sleepless nights, but I still ran my business, right? But it was like what is required. It's almost like I started to
Yeah.
get that exhaustion, and you hit that wall. I always felt like it was a wall or sort of this gray cloud that used to come over me. And then it would sort of sink in, but I was like, whoa, 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 what's going to be required here?
Yeah.
It's going to get me through, right? It's nutrition, it's diet, it's rest for me at that point.
And I think a big thing here is asking for support. Right. So I think a lot of people, it's not vocalized in that initial phase. Like, oh, I could, like, how many of us have, like, oh, well, I know personally, I pushed through that. And then it wasn't until I was actually in burnout that I was like, oh shit, I'm in burnout. Like my adrenals, they need, then it was sort of like, okay, I had to kind of dig out of the hole. But there's like almost this, what comes up to me is like, it's almost like a coffee addiction, like you're like, oh, I'm tired. I need the coffee, or, oh, I need that sugar, or, oh, I need that thing. If you're tired and you find that thing fills the hole, it can only fill the hole for a certain amount of time before your body starts to just be like, yeah, that thing you're grabbing ain't gonna do it anymore. It's like not gonna cut it. It's like you could have a pot of coffee by you, but it ain't gonna cut it. And I would say, you're in a deeper level of burnout for at least, well, this is not a medical term, but it's almost like you feel tired in your bones.
Yeah.
You don't have a string that you can pull yourself back up. And we don't really want anybody to get to that place, right? Because adrenals, and now I am all about healing. I'm all about, like, I really believe our bodies know how to heal everything and anything. So that's totally possible. It just takes longer the more we go deep into, it's almost like when you get to that bone tired, you're like, you ain't got reserves. Like coffee ain't going to fix it. It's going to take a
Yeah.
long time for supplementation. We're looking at IV support. We're looking at, healing so much more. Now, is it possible? Absolutely. It's just that once it gets to that, then it's chronic fatigue. Then it's like you have weekends where you do need to spend the weekend in bed, or you have times where you're like, you'll get sick more. You'll get to these places where you're like, I literally can't do the thing because now I have no reserves,
Yeah.
you know?
I
And
always
and that's tricky.
No, I always picture
Go
it
ahead.
as like your gas tank is like empty and you're like running on fumes. You know that feeling? Like you're like
Yeah.
pop, pop,
Yeah.
pop, and then you're like recognizing like you're not even looking at your gas tank on E. And you're like, oh my God, how long have I been on E for? It's like that feeling of being
Totally.
like, and then you're covering it up, right, with fumes, coffee or alcohol or whatever it is, some kind of stimulant, even exercise. Sometimes when people are in burnout, I do find that they can also like over exercise because they're like, I just need something to get me through the day. I'm going to exercise, but their energy is not necessarily sustainable.
Well, this is interesting. This is a really interesting spot too, because this is where I'll see diet and even the Wim Hof method, people like getting in ice cold plunges. And if you are in total burnout, like some of those things like fasting diets and cold, anything that stresses your system is actually dipping even deep. You're like at the ice cream bucket, but there's no ice cream, but you're still trying, you're like breaking it's like these things where they're, marketed as healthy. Now, I love all of them, fasting, great. Like they all have their time and place. But if you're already in deep, deep burnout, like I even went when we first moved here, I went to a slide, a adventure slide, and it was like that. I could feel like literally tapping of my adrenals. That was like my total sign of like, okay, I'm in Mexico. We moved here. It's like really my time to heal because I'd never experienced that where like a fun thing was actually too much for my system.
Yeah.
And it was like, holy shit, like, okay, like taking this serious, back up, back the train up, no more slides, no more adrenaline in that way. It was sort of like
Not yet.
take a pot. Not yet. No,
Not that,
exactly. And it's
not
none
at
of
that
this is
point, right?
forever.
Yeah.
No, exactly. And so if you are feeling that like extreme burnout, then it's really, I look at burnout as we've left our bodies. We're in a push, we're in a go, we've done too much. And now it's sort of like a turn, not that we're have to shut the whole world. I mean, look, Katie
Yeah.
had 2 kids, she ran her business, she was very successful. I have 3 kids, ran my business, stayed up with it. And I knew, just like Katie said, I knew that it was like, what's it gonna take to heal and keep moving? Because I knew I didn't want to spend time in bed, but it did mean changing my schedule. It did mean hiring support. It did look like, IVs and acupuncture and massage and like turning towards me instead of like, I feel like burnout can sometimes be like, and it can be an excitement. Like I'm in my business, it's successful, it's going really well. I'm like happy with my kids and like go. But it's like, we have to turn back to ourselves and say, like, what, just like you said, that's how I'm seeing this is like turning back to me and say, what's required for me to keep with my dream and also be really healthy as I do it. Because for me, that's a high value. For Katie, your health is a high value, right?
Yes.
Has to be kind of part of your value system. So I want to be healthy, wealthy, and thriving in my body. Because
Yeah.
to me, if I have all the money in the world, but I don't have my health, then sort of like, what's the point? You know?
Yeah. Yeah. It's sort of like that circular nature of it. If you have money in the bank, but you can't even enjoy outside, what's the point of it? And also, if you don't have money in the bank, but you're super healthy, but you can't do anything with your life because you don't have the money to do anything with it, it's like sort of it's cyclical in nature, and you can see that as cyclical, right? It's
Yeah.
congruent. It can feed each other. And we've been both in alternative. I've been in alternative medicine for 15 years, right? And I've actually seen so much burnout in executive type of positions and high level CEOs. And the other aspect we want to bring forward, not only for the body, right, the mind and the spirit, because a lot of
Yeah.
times people actually hit stages of burnout. Like I was sort of saying a little bit before, where they're spiritually disconnected from their purpose.
Yeah.
And even sometimes if we feel like we are in our purpose to some degree, but there's like another layer that hasn't been revealed to us yet, or we're not fully grasping, and we're going in the opposite direction of that, that can also create burnout. It's almost like it's friction. So you're almost like running away from that thing that you know that you're supposed to go towards. I do believe that can also cause like almost like a spiritual burnout. And it also can lead to healing crises and spiritual healing crises where
Yeah.
you're literally your mind, body, and spirit has put you into bed, right? To like sit with almost like that dark night of the soul feeling and go like, what
Yeah.
is my purpose from here? This also can cause almost like that it's almost like a spiritual rising right within. And it's not a bad thing, actually. I mean, if we can get out of that and go like, what is the purpose of this here? And what is my purpose going forward? It's like Phoenix rising. It's like going into the ashes and like burning and transforming and then ultimately being reborn into that space of what is next for you. And I do find this also at entrepreneurs that have been at it for a while. Like they're seasoned, they have wisdom, they've been in entrepreneurship, they know what it takes, they know what it feels like, they know the consistency that's required, they've hit at high levels. And oftentimes there's this actual burnout. It's almost like the what is it, like the dawn, right? Like almost the death before the dawn or whatever that saying is,
Hmm.
right? Like there's like this rising into your next level, into almost being reborn into something even greater of your mission. And this actually can lead, or burnout can lead up to that. And it's almost like what awareness needs to come in for you if you're even feeling like if this resonates with you, like, oh my God, I do feel that. Like you're listening to me now, and like I feel that that is part of my that's part of my journey. I feel like I'm right at the edge of that. And then almost the question for you, because there's so many different ways to sort of go through this, is like what is required for you and your mission to step into that, and then what is
Yeah.
that for you? So you can even ask that question, what is required for me to step fully into that space, like kind of transmuting the burnout into that trajectory, that destiny, that thing that's calling you to step. And sometimes it's scary. Sometimes it's like, oh man, I know that for me, it's launching this big thing. I know it's this big investment. I know it's this you know, walking across the stage. I know it's, putting something else out there. Like you may know what that thing is and you may not. But the question starts with like what am I on the brink of that pivotal moment? And then what is required onto to almost not spin back down right into that old space, but to go forth into that new space.
Yeah. It's so true. It's like, and I love the question of like, I'm spin and you, it's like a choose. It's like you said, it's a pivotal point, right? Like, am I going to choose up? And if I do, what is going to come in that I will require for the support? Right? If like we've just done we're launching into something, so it's like what's required. The other big thing is like, where do I usually fall off in that big leap? Like this awareness of self and of the big vision, to be like, okay, like it's almost like a code of like, okay, here's this big thing, and your energy, you need your body to do the dream, you need your spirit to do the dream, you need your I'm thinking your mind,
Yeah.
your mind. Yeah, I was
Or
like, what are
psyche.
mind, body, spirit, right? The psyche, and in all of those levels, there's a level of support to come in to let that up level really happen, so that you don't go, you don't just get there and then you fall way back down and you're like, oh shit, my body, I didn't bring my body, I didn't nurture it, I didn't get it massages, I didn't get it healthy food, I was eating crap, I was pushing it. And then, not that you can't reach those things, but it's like it's easier when you consider all of the aspects, right? That's yeah.
It's more
And
fun.
so
You're like
yeah, exactly.
you're
And it's
like,
like
come
way more
come
fun because
on,
it's like,
mind. Like, come on, mind.
yeah,
Like your spirit and your body's like, yes. And your mind's like, can we do this? Like, are we
yeah,
sure? Like the
yeah.
rumination can start too. And you're like, it's almost like everything needs to come with you right to that space, and even noticing like, oh yeah, my body does sort of lag on that, or my mind does, or my spirit, I don't feel totally aligned. And the truth is, you don't have to feel perfect in this. There's not
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
perfect euphoric way of doing this. Usually this is actually chaotic and messy, and you're swearing through it and
Yeah.
things happen,
You're like,
and you're just like
sometimes you might be kicking. Yeah.
you go into your toddler and you're like, why is this not working out for me? I thought I did all the work, and you're
Yes.
like,
Yeah.
screaming and whatever, like it's not this perfect, like euphoric thing that just creates out of it. But it's almost like going through that space of going like, this is my next level, right? This is my purpose. This is the direction that I want to go. And then what is required for me and my support systems and my blah, 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 whatever you want to add to that, without compromising things too as well. And I want to say
Yeah.
this. So sometimes there is a little bit of compromise in the
Yeah.
process where if you're like, okay, what is going to be required here? Well, damn, I'm going to have to work a Saturday. I'm going to have to do
Yeah.
this thing. Like, and it's not like you have to do it forever, but sometimes when you have that like oomph and you're pushing out into something, like you may have to compromise a little bit. And that's okay, right? We don't want to compromise our whole life and going like, that's not part of our dream to be compromised every single moment of our life. But sometimes when it does take that little oomph into something greater, then that may be required of you.
Yeah, and I like to look at compromise as like values, right? So if it's aligned, still aligns with your values, you're like, and you just ask, am I willing to do that?
Yes.
Can I do that? Do I have the energy for that? Do I have the support? Like, I am going to hire somebody. If I have a dream and like someone can't show up for me, I'm going to hire somebody to show up so I can do the thing, right? Or it's like the compromise is going to look different for many people. And I agree, Katie. It's like, it's not like, I don't like this idea of like, this mother compromise, like you have to give, you can't live your dreams because you're a mom, or you can't live your, so it's, I know that's not what you're saying, but I
Yeah.
just want to like take it to the other end, because like a part of me is like, well, even with what Katie and I are doing, we're like, are we willing to show up and add this in addition to our business and
Yes.
business is? And we're like, yes, because we can see the value for us is to create something together in a collaborate, right? So it's like, it's that. But if it was like, you have to, for me, if it was a compromise that like I had to give up every weekend, I'd probably be like, I'd find a different way.
Yeah. Yep. And I
I'd
think
say that doesn't work.
yeah, that's a truth too. And I like that you bring this forward. It's like there's a difference between compromise and being a sacrificial lamb, right? There's
Yes,
there's a difference between
totally.
compromise and being
And it
like,
gets confused. It's
right,
confused. People are like, I mean, talk
you
about,
must
we're
be
both moms, so it's like,
sacrificial.
must sacrifice like my dreams. And it was like, no, like that's done.
You
We're
don't
done in this lifetime. We're
Yeah,
not
you
doing that
don't
here.
have to do that. And that's the other part
Yeah.
though too, is like we can go into like the people that are like, well, we got to sacrifice everything and hustle, and then get into like these martyr complexes where then it's
Yeah.
like a victimization cycle. We're not
Yeah.
talking about that. We're
No.
talking about,
Yeah.
if you want to elevate to your dreams with your values, with what you like require for yourself, right? Or you want, or you dream, or you desire for yourself in your lifetime, then it's okay to sacrifice a little bit. It's okay to compromise a little bit if you have to, right? If you, or you want to. Ultimately, you sort of want to compromise. And I
Right.
think that's the biggest difference with when we go into sacrificing, like, oh, gotta work so hard. We still work very, very hard. Like it's not like we're just sitting around and twiddling our thumbs and hoping that things manifest. The truth is like it's not one or the other, and we don't have to go into black and white thinking about the process of it, right? The process of sacrifice. And I do believe this goes back to the burnout thing, where I do believe if you're in this constant state of sacrifice and you're always the sacrificial person, like I'm going to sacrifice my health for my wealth, or I'm going to
Yeah.
sacrifice my career for my family, you're going to go into burnout. Like anybody that's gone through that, that person is going to burn out in one way or the other, because you don't have that holistic perspective of like what's
Yeah.
required and what's my values. Cause you're going to, probably, I'm not going to say everybody, but me end up, 20 years in and going like, what am I doing? Like
or
I'm still
less. I mean,
working
I
on it.
definitely, I mean, I can relate to that. I sacrificed a lot of my body and my health for my partner and his kids and through custody and I mean, first medical school. And then it was like coming out of that and into residency where it's sort of like trained, you're a resident. So like you don't, it's like a bizarre combo, right? So it's like 6 years medical school, residency, and then into a relationship where I literally sacrificed. And I'm healing. Like so much in a different place, but it's like if you sacrifice, you're gonna guarantee resentment.
Yes.
You're gonna guarantee you come like, and some people, mine came. Thank God, at least I came out faster. And it was like once we got to Mexico, I was like, oh, I'm healing now. Like this is like Mexico was like, come to the warmth, and like literally, it was allowed me the space to start to be like to take that time to really reestablish it. I'd already had 3 kids, it was like any woman that has a child and a man that has children that lost sleep, it's like there
Yes.
has to be a rebalancing.
Yeah.
But I can say I have always sacrificed. And and now I'm like, oh no, 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 no. Like not that I have very firm knowing and understanding of how much that saps your energy. Now, compromise or not compromise. What was our word?
Yeah, compromise.
It was. Okay, that's
Yeah.
funny because now
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
coming
yeah.
up a little different. But it's like, yeah, it's such a different thing. It's like if I if you had gone into something like that with I just didn't have the awareness, right? I didn't
Yes.
really know what it was gonna take. And now I'm like, oh, now I have the foresight of like, oh, I would do that very differently.
Yeah.
Right? And I don't judge, I don't look back and, judge myself for how I showed up, but I'm like, "Oh, I would have integrated my wellness." Like I like that holistic, like the holistic approach. I would have integrated like way more self-care. I would have integrated space. I would have integrated nutrition. Not that I wasn't, but it was like it very mind, body, spirit was not nourished in that sacrifice of, 7 years or whatever, 5 years. 5 years
Yeah.
of full sacrifice, and then now I'm a recovering sacrificial woman or
Lamb.
whatever
Yeah,
that
yeah.
is. Lamb. Yeah, I was like, maybe I don't think I was a
Recover.
lamb, but I was like the lion that was, but like I don't know, somewhere there was like, so it happens. And like how many people, it can happen to men and women, it can happen in
Yeah.
weird ass relationships, it can
Yeah.
happen in business, it can happen with children. How many women, Katie, do we have that are clients that like, oh, this goes back to one of our other podcasts, but like they killed their dreams because they had kids and they decided to like they sacrificed themselves. And I think this is big because there's a lot tight this funny that we're from burnout to sacrifice, but it's like I think Katie and I both were were there for our children, and we recognize our dreams and our businesses matter and our vision matters enough to be like, no, like we're doing this.
Yeah.
Like we're
Yes.
doing this, and what's it going to take? And of course we're like, what are we going to add to our personal stuff? What can I do for Katie? What can Katie do for me, our families, all of that. And so it's almost like going into, I think where we're getting even with this conversation is that burnout wouldn't exist as much as it does if we had more awareness around the whole like business. I mean, really all of life, if we had more awareness and connection even with our bodies,
Hmm.
you know,
Yeah.
it sound like just even how we're talking, it's like, oh, like what would it look like if we all had that awareness? Now, you and I have developed this skill, I would say, quite well because we knew we were individually up leveling in our businesses, and we almost just were like we travel so intuitively that you're like, hey, I'm adding this, and I was like, hey, that's crazy because I'm adding. Yeah, it's almost like when you up level, what are you adding back into you?
Yeah. Yeah, and the other thing
You
is
know?
even if you're listening now and you're going like, "Dang, I am in burnout. Like, how do I get out of it?" Right? And we're
Yeah,
saying like the
yeah,
first thing is ultimately creating awareness around it. Like, where are you burning your candle at both
yeah,
ends? And then what is required of you to not like stop doing that, but to add in support around it,
yeah,
maybe to pull back. Maybe if you're even that person that tends to be like, "Oh, I'm so busy, I have no room for self-care." That is not
yeah.
true. I want to
And
challenge
that's
you
a
right
then
now.
that's a
Like,
sign. That's a
that is
sign. If you're
not,
all saying that,
yeah,
if you're
that is
driving,
not
you're like, you
true.
just don't understand.
You
We
don't,
do understand
we
because we have
do.
kids. We got kids. We got all that.
Yep.
So
Yep.
Yeah, I love that. It is
I
not true.
is not
It is
true.
not
Where are
true.
you utilizing? Where are you scrolling on social media? Where are you
Yep.
gossiping? Where are you
Oh,
entering
yeah.
conversations or relationships that really aren't conducive for your future? Where are you sacrificing yourself? Maybe even in a friendship where that's taking your energy. I want to pretty much guarantee that you're not too busy to
Yeah.
create what you want to create. It could be actually subtracting some things that are burning you up. And then what is
Yep.
there? And now if you are in like really extreme burnout, right? And you may like the one thing too is like there may be support that's required for you. Like you may need to seek out medical care, right? You may need to
Yep.
talk with your naturopathic physician. You may need to find one. Like you're like listening to this
Yeah.
pod. I don't even know where to start,
Yeah.
seeking help for my physical burnout too as well. So we're not giving you medical advice here,
No,
clearly.
no, we're not.
But
No.
the truth is like it's okay to be there. We've both been there. That's how
Yeah.
we know how to get out of it too as well. And I'm sure but we wanted to offer this, it's a perspective on it, right? It's a different
Yeah.
way of seeing burnout. And then how can you get your mind, body, and spirit on board with what's required for you in this next year as you're listening to this podcast? Well, how can you go into this next year like mitigating some of that burnout? And if you do start to get overly sort of zealous in that area, how can you catch yourself and sort of like, I don't want to say it's damaging, but undo some of that, like unravel a little bit of that before you get into the deeper levels of it.
And I want to add this here, Katie, because this is not to be overwhelming either. Like we have 12 months. We're recording this in January, but like let's say wherever you're listening to it, and in 12 months from this moment, what if you just added or subtracted one thing each month? Right? Because we can get again overexcited and be like, oh my God, I'm gonna change. I used to do this. I'm like, I'm gonna add 10 things this week. And it would be like, like, but if you add one thing and I slowed down, I simplified, like it might just be like what Katie said. If you don't have a holistic practitioner, find a holistic practitioner. That might be the first month. The second month might be like, wow, I'm really going to clean up my bedtime routine. I'm watching, this is something I've done in the last few months is like dimming the lights, not scrolling before bed, reading a book before bed, waking up. How am I waking up? I'm not getting right on social media. Like some of those places that felt like an energy leak for me, it would be like, what kind of meals? How can I don't personally want to cook all the time because I value my time differently in that way. So how can I support the family, have healthy meals? So, like each month you might write all the things you want to change now or add holistically, and then be like, okay, each month I'll add one thing or I'll subtract one thing. So it doesn't feel we can get over excited and add it all at once and then nothing happens. Nothing happens. And then you're
Yep.
the same place a year from now because you overwhelmed yourself. So I'm saying simple, consistent action. This is like Katie, like it's so unsexy and it really works. Is like simple, consistent action. Add one thing, master it, add the next thing.
And the last thing I want to leave your listeners with too, as well, is like if you are a practitioner, you're a clinician, you're a coach, and you're
Yeah.
trying to do
Yeah.
it for yourself, stop doing that because you
Yeah.
actually need
You're
somebody
not listening to
outside of
yourself.
you.
You're a bad doctor to
No,
yourself.
you cannot diagnose and treat yourself. Trust me.
No,
Like it's
exactly.
too hard to see out inside of yourself. There's so many things you may be
Yep.
missing. So find that person, that coach, that physician, that person that's going to help walk you through this next level, whether it's physically, mentally, spiritually, or emotionally, or maybe all of it. But that's the
Yep.
last thing I want to leave because I know that that's little
That's
like
so good.
trickling
Yeah.
in, right? To saying seek help,
The
seek
leaders,
support.
the leaders need this, Katie and I are here for the leaders. I had the same thought today as I was driving around. I was like, leaders still need that nourishment and container to nourish themselves,
Yes.
and we're not meant to like, I'm on the mountain alone. Like y'all aren't alone. Knock it off. seek seek somebody you love and admire and respect and work with that in that way, because it will really add to your life. Katie and I both do that for ourselves as well. So
Yes.
this is really exciting. Share what's coming up for you guys down below, and we'll see you soon. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Dreams to Dollars podcast.
If you vibe with our content and want to find out how to work with us, check out our show notes for the links.